the end of the channel. It's not really. This is where the yellow one's going to live, to create more room for the Juke project over there, and also a space where we can get that very rare engine installed. Small matter of getting it up. Have to make some ramps or something. Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Flashback.
Welcome back, everyone. It's been a while, so this time we're going to do something a bit different and go back to the very start of my love of cars. Or perhaps that should be love of calves. You see, there's a reason why Mark II Cavaliers have always been in the background of this channel. And it's not because my best mate growing up had one, and when he crashed it, the car looked after us. Or because they were one of the fastest cars that a 20-year-old could afford. Like this SRI 130 that cost me just £100. But there must have been something that's led me to save 20 of these cars, to make some amazing friends and to drive them all over Europe on amazing adventures. And while many have gone on to new owners and new countries, some have been incredibly special to me. So why have these 1980s cars been a constant in my life? This is the story of the one car that started it all. And this is me and my granddad in Longniddry, Scotland. And this is my mum, my brother and I. And this is a story about the car my dad bought for my mum from this salesman at a dealership in Haddington, Scotland, that closed in 2018, that was owned by this chap, Ian Glass. And this is the entry from the sales book. The car was delivered in February 1982, and this is a shot from the start of 1983, and that's me. The car worked hard for its early life, being driven regularly from England to Scotland, but shortly after we moved to Kinross, my mum passed away. The design of the Mark II started in 1977. On its launch in 1981, it offered class-leading levels of fuel economy and performance, which had never been seen in a car of its size before. The Mark II would sell over 1 million units in the UK, and the reason my mum's Cavalier survived for so long was that my dad believed in the value of protection. Now, when my mum died, I'd vowed I'd keep the car forever. But while I'd been at uni, my family were threatening to scrap the car if I didn't get it from the bottom of the garden. What was worse, all of the repairs I'd done as a teenager had begun to show through again. Nonetheless, I drove the car through my early 20s and attempted to keep on top of the bodywork the best I could. My brother was also really happy that I'd kept the car on the road. But by 2002, even though I'd paid to have the arches done by a local garage, the rust was coming back. And the lack of definition in the rear arches made me want to cry.
And then the beast. Listening to some tunes, mate. Oh, and there's the man himself.
I realised that if I wanted the car to survive, I needed professional help. I mean, I need professional help anyway, but this help came in the form of 3 amazing Hampshire residents. And the car moved to Andover for its rebuild, where it shared a barn with some distinguished company. While this was all happening, Dougie and I also saved the only other yellow Cavalier hatchback left, that's now owned by Steffi and Kier. But all of this was just a distraction from the hard work to get my mum's Cavalier back on the road again. The second part of this episode is all video shot this year. But to really understand this car and how rusty it was, I think it's time for a
Brief construction montage.
So, seats out, glass out, doors off. Boot on. Arches off. Arches on. Back panel off. Completely. And the back panel back on again. And unlike the Ascona, the inner sills were okay. Unfortunately, the last body shop had welded a new set of arches on top of the old ones, badly. Still, Kev worked his magic and reskinned the doors, attached the new sills and arches. Although this was before the days of high definition video, these photos have held up well to give you an idea of the sheer amount of work that was put into bringing the Cav back to life. And as the final preparations for the respray approached, it seemed only right the other yellow Cav would help make it happen. In fact, the other yellow Cav that we'd saved was part of the deal I'd struck to get my mum's Cavalier painted. Here's a supercut of the respray in 2006. Now this was almost 20 years ago, and it's testament to it that it still looks pretty good today. So that was it. And while this had all been going on, I'd managed to source the engine that I wanted my mum's Cav to have. Remember I told you that the J car was sold all around the world with different variants? Well, in America, they didn't get the 2-litre 16-valve red top, they got a turbo 8-valve. And this little 8-valve was good for about 160 brake horsepower, stock. But I'd found someone who had drag raced them, and who was willing to build me an uprated one. With arc bolts, forged pistons, a large intercooler and a bigger turbo, with much better flow. And this C20 Get was good for almost 250 brake at the wheels, so you can add another 30 for the flywheel figure. And due to another Paul who worked at DB Schenker, we managed to get this shipped to the yard, complete with a bunch of service items that would not have been possible to get in the UK. Now you'd think getting the enlarged inlet back all painted up and looking mint would mean that we put the engine in and we got it running, but unfortunately a certain white V6 Ascona got in the way. And the yellow Cav never outgrew the early 2-litre red top that Paul lent me to get the yellow Cav running, and the Get has sat in my container for 20 years.
End of flashback.
And back in the present day, there was now the challenge of getting it started for the first time in years. So we're going to check the spark plugs and work out if that's why this thing's not actually firing up. It's always the problem when you've not worked on a car for ages. Like, there's a bit of an ignition switch. Why is that there? The right size? Yep. Oh, it's a bit grubby. It looks okay. Bone dry, always a good sign. I will put proper antifreeze in this soon, I promise. What was that? That was either ice or rust in that rad hose. That's a bit scary. Oh well, here we go. Watch that spark plug there for me, will you? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the fuel pump is actually spinning up by putting these jumper cables to the fuel pump. Let's see what happens. I remember greasing these up. Okay. Right, are we going to get any action from Mr. Fuel Pump? Yes, we are. So there's at least some fuel up there now. Oh, it's gonna go. Probably. So, even though these spark plugs were new 5-6 years ago, if it is as simple as changing the plugs, I'll be a bit gutted. So, another nice little update. I seem to have a leaking radiator. It's got antifreeze in it, but it does look like the radiator is burst in at least 3 places. So that's a bit of a worry. You ever have one of those days? Well, they're a downgrade from the twin sparks that we had, but at least they're nice and shiny. Please fit. Last job of the day. Clearly something's wrong with it.
2,000 years later.
Radiator replacement, I think. It's everywhere. The good news is it smells like there was actually antifreeze in it. It's just gone bad. Right, let's flush that out a little bit, I think. Let's see how bad it is.
moments later.
Well, that was that.
More moments later. A few inches later.
Ivan, you smug bastard. It was the fuel. You can hear the lifters are quietening down now. Let's just run it up to temperature and see what we get. One advantage of a car that's lived most of its life in a container, a dash that hasn't destroyed itself. Tell me if the lights work. How much condensation would you expect? Now the Cav was technically almost ready for an MOT again, but I'd been here before and there were still many small niggles that had been doing my head in because I'd been chasing perfection rather than accepting very good and being out there and driving the thing. Probably the... Oh shit, there's a cable in that. Whoops, not anymore. Probably the most frustrating thing though was, I don't think you can see, because we replaced these wheel arches, I actually ended up rolling these back on the side of the M5 with the handle of a lump hammer, and it still wasn't enough. If you can put, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but it was catching the edge of the tyres, not these wheels, I put these on after because it was destroying them, but it was basically catching the lip here and filling the car with smoke. We had a car that wasn't drivable because every time I hit a pothole the wheels bounced up into the arches and they shredded the rubber. That would be a badge of honour if it was a slammed VW, but it's not, so it shouldn't have done it. So now, after another 6 years, I've realised that was stupid and this thing should have been on the road the whole time, because if it was on the road I'd have got all the little bits and pieces sorted. What does it really need? A rear wiper, the interior putting in, a rear spoiler, some trim, but it's MOT-able now. It's been on the road once and it can go on the road again. So the plan is, despite COVID, despite a Juke, despite all of the other problems, we're going to enjoy ourselves and go for a drive in this. That's the plan anyway. And then all effort will be on getting this thing MOT'd. Wish me luck. Now, if you've watched this far, I've got a reasonable chance of getting you to subscribe, because we're about to take this Cav on a 1,500-mile shakedown. But first, we've got to make the wheels fit. 182. It's worse than working in the other container. I know. This is ground zero for chunks out of tyres. And it still looks a bit close. Oh, I won't know until it sells. Right, okay, what am I doing? So we know it runs. Now it needs an interior. Because for the last 6 years it's only had this temporary Recaro. So yeah, get the carpet in, fit the rest of the sound deadening or what's left of it, get the rest of the carpet in on the front. I'm going to leave the door cards off for now because it's going to get MOT'd and it's a bank holiday weekend. So in 2016 when this was last on the road, like I said before, I was so annoyed by what wasn't right on the car, I just kind of lost my way with it. I think also when the car is bare shelled, it can be a bit overwhelming. But I think in many ways it was getting that Juke that kind of made me realise that if you can do a communist fire engine, you can do pretty much anything. So yeah, so let's see how I get on anyway. It would help if there was a door check strap holding this door open. If you're wondering why I'm changing the chairs, it's because these were only temporary because everything else was really clean and I didn't want to get it dirty. Time to swap the bases over. It's looking very empty in here. Hopefully I can get it back together again before the MOT. I've come up with a cunning plan. Well, that or I'm ruining my seatbelts. But basically, these go white after a few years and then they fall to bits and then your seatbelt stops working. I think it's the acid or the alkaline in our skin. So I'm trying to use some lacquer on these to see if I can stop the aging. But yes, OCD is a thing. I don't know if that'll do any good at all. Okay, just getting the front carpet in now. Something so light, it's amazing how clunky this can be. I don't think it helps that it's not been in the car for donkey's years either. Right, let's get this bad boy up. Right, seats in time. Okay, I forgot that you need to put the carpet in first before your seat belts and all those clips. But it's a huge improvement just to get a bit of carpet in there. So yeah, once I got going, it was pretty easy. Right, I'm about done for the day. Tighten the handbrake, refit the headlight, make the exhaust not knock on the body, and then we'll go for an MOT. I'm knackered. Funny how much more comfy these are than modern seats. Anyone want some lightly used Recaros? Right. I think if I can stick the front number plate on, it might survive an MOT. Let's find out. Original keys. with my tests complete, it was time to head to the MOT station, where the major issue encountered was the CAV being 6 times over the legal emissions limit. Luckily, being an early valver, there was a screw on the airflow meter and the emissions came down to the legal limit. I was gutted that the new suspension hadn't arrived in time for the MOT, but it had passed anyway, although the tester did give me a funny look when I mentioned the ride height. But I didn't care. The CAV was MOT'd for the first time in years, and I had a crazy road trip in mind. For a car that had barely been driven since I was 21, the idea of a 1,500-mile trip was exciting and intimidating. Exciting because the car was going home for the first time in over 30 years, and intimidating because, well, who knew what was going to happen? But what was certain, I was going to meet new and old friends alike, who in their own unique ways were going to help me finish my Cavalier journey. I really hope you can join me.
It started up and sprayed its arse on the wall.
If you've been affected by issues in this video, please call. What the fuck are you talking about? You're just talking shit. Ow. Alright. Jesus Christ. No. What are you doing to my leg?